She said, "Once I'm married, I hope my grandpa just disappears so I can finally sell that old house." Have you ever heard something like that? From someone you raised someone you'd give your last dollar to? Because I did, and I didn't scream, I didn't fight, I just started planning. Before we jump in, I want to know where in the world are you right now, and what time are you listening? Let me know in the comments. I was never the kind of man who liked surprises. I taught history for 30 years. Life made sense when things stayed in order, dates, causes, effects. But that day broke every pattern I knew. I stopped by the restaurant where my granddaughter worked, holding a box of cookies I'd baked for her. She was laughing with 2 coworkers, voice bright and sharp. I waited by the kitchen door, not wanting to interrupt. Then I heard her say, clear as a bell, "After the wedding, I hope Grandpa just disappears. I can't wait to sell that old house." My mind refused to accept it. Those words didn't belong to the girl who once sat on my shoulders to hang Christmas ornaments. My hand tightened around the box until it bent. No one noticed me standing there. I walked to the car and sat behind the wheel, staring at nothing. There wasn't anger yet, just a hollow space like when a student gives the wrong answer and doesn't know it. I told myself maybe she was joking, maybe I'd misheard. The drive home stretched longer than usual. Houses blurred, kids rode bikes, life went on. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it worse. At home, the porch light flickered once and went out. I set the crushed cookie box on the table. The house carried its familiar scent of old wood, but tonight it pressed on me. My wife's photo waited on the mantel, her smile steady as ever. "Guess we didn't do as well as we hoped," I muttered. My voice sounded like someone else's. The clock ticked behind me. Pipes hummed, the fridge kicked on small reminders the house was still alive even if we weren't. For years, Chloe had been the reason I kept it that way. After her parents split, she was 6. She'd crawl into my bed when thunder scared her, her hair smelling of apples. I told her stories about sailors following stars home. I thought I was building something solid. Turns out I was only giving her more to sell. I made tea, but never drank it. The steam vanished before I noticed. Words on the newspaper blurred. Around midnight, I put on my jacket and stepped onto the porch. A dog barked somewhere, then stopped. Through the neighborhood, faint lights glowed behind curtains, families, still intact dinners, TV-easy laughter. Mine felt hollow, as if life had packed up and left. At the edge of the yard, the soil still held footprints from last week's rain. My wife once planted daffodils along the fence. They hadn't bloomed in years. I thought about pulling weeds, then let my hands fall. Standing there, I realized how cruel silence can be. When you're young, it feels like wisdom. Later, it becomes erasure, one small surrender at a time. I'd been quiet too often when Chloe skipped birthdays, when she called only for money, when she said Christmas was too busy. Each time I told myself she'd come around, I went back in, turned off the lamps. The house sank into darkness, everything ticking or humming like a body you no longer feel part of. A part of me wanted to drive back to confront her. Another said it wouldn't matter. You can't teach gratitude to someone who's never gone without. You can't make love look like sacrifice to someone who's never lost anything. The fridge clicked again, louder. I flinched, then laughed softly. It felt strange, but steadier than tears. In the drawer where I kept old letters, I found a postcard Chloe sent from college sunset palm trees. A note. "Thanks for everything, Grandpa. Love you always." I rubbed my thumb over the ink until it smudged. Maybe love doesn't vanish, it just changes into something unrecognizable. The tea had gone cold. I poured it out, rinsed the cup. My hands trembled. At the door, the night hung still. I thought of calling Maggie next door, but didn't. She'd only worry. I stepped onto the porch, without the jacket this time. The cold tightened my skin. A car passed headlights, sliding over the fence before disappearing. "You did your best, old man," I whispered, not sure who I meant. I walked down the steps. No destination, just moving, because staying hurt more. The gravel cracked beneath my shoes. Chloe's words stayed with me. Sharp, careless, too young to know what they meant. She might forget she ever said them. I wouldn't. The kettle whistled. I burned the toast, watched smoke curl up and fade. Chloe texted about a wedding appointment, her tone clipped and polite. I typed a reply, erased it, turned the phone face down. 2 envelopes waited by the door, both from the bank. I almost tossed them into the junk pile, but noticed my name printed in bold beside hers. One was a savings plan. I'd never opened joint under Harold Whitman and Chloe Whitman. The meaning came slow but heavy. She'd used my name. My chest tightened, same as it used to before a parent-teacher meeting when I knew I'd failed to reach someone. Maggie called offering to bring pie. I told her to come. She arrived with a dish that smelled of cinnamon and common sense. "You look like someone who forgot the test was today," she said. It's nothing I told her, but handed her the papers anyway. She skimmed them, glasses slipping down her nose. "You sure you agreed to this?" I didn't. Her arms crossed. Then talk to her or the bank. Silence isn't kindness, Harold. It's permission. When she left, the pie cooled on the counter. I stared at it, thinking of Chloe at 6 flour on her cheeks, pressing cookie dough beside me, asking if heaven had a kitchen. I'd said yes. I used to think she'd remember moments like that. Maybe she did. Maybe they just shrunk over time. By afternoon, I walked to the bank. The lobby smelled faintly of cleaner. A young clerk greeted me too cheerfully. I handed him the letter. He frowned at the screen. "Your granddaughter added you as co-signer on her loan. You should have received a consent form." I didn't. My hands felt damp. "I can file a review," he said carefully. "Do that," I answered, turning away before pity could settle in. On the walk home, the light thinned behind the trees. My knees ached. Kids played basketball at the corner, shouting, certain the world would always give them another day. I envied that kind of faith. Maggie was waiting on my porch. "Well," she asked, "as bad as it looks?" She nodded once. "Then fix it. Don't think about fixing it. Do it." I didn't argue. I went in, sorted. The mail opened a can of soup, ate half of it without tasting. The radio murmured nonsense, then I turned it off. Upstairs, I found an old box of paperwork bills, letters, tax slips. I slid the bank statement in, as if hiding it could stop it from existing. I called Chloe. No answer. Left a message. "Hey, kiddo. Got some mail with both our names on it. Call me." She didn't. Thunder rolled low and steady. I poured another cup of coffee I didn't need. The bitterness steadied my hands. The house creaked. I leaned in the doorway, listening to the wind shift against the siding. Somewhere down the block, a car passed through a puddle and kept going. I thought about calling Maggie again, but didn't. Doing nothing was a choice, too. The curtains swayed once, then stilled. I went upstairs, leaving the papers on the table ink drying as the storm moved over the roof. At the bank, the same clerk waved me over with his supervisor in tow. They spoke in low tones while I stood beside a dusty plastic plant no one had bothered to clean. People glanced at me with that half-pity reserved for the old part, concern part assumption. I was confused. When the supervisor finally turned, she wore that polished smile used for bad news. "Mr. Whitman, your granddaughter added you as co-signer 3 months ago." The forms were notarized elsewhere. I asked for a copy. She printed it and slid it forward. The signature was neat, mine, in shape, not in truth. Walking home, the weight in my chest didn't surprise me anymore. Somewhere between the parking lot and my street, the part of me that still expected honesty just let go. I left the paper on the kitchen table. The kettle screamed and went silent on its own. Chloe called that night, her tone smooth and practiced. "Grandpa, are you coming to dinner tomorrow? Kyle's parents want to meet you." I agreed before I could think. Maybe I needed to see how she'd wear the lie. Dinner was at a small Italian place near downtown. Garlic hung in the air. I wore the jacket from my teaching days, chalk still faint in the seams. Kyle greeted me with a firm handshake, steady trained. "Heard a lot about you, sir." Chloe talked about honeymoon plans, about modernizing the family house. Kyle added perfect for an Airbnb. Something in me cleared, not anger, just understanding. They weren't joking. I excused myself, stepped under the awning. Through the glass, I watched them lean close, already plotting futures on foundations I'd built. When I returned, Chloe asked if I was all right. I nodded. "Fine, I'll settle the bill." She didn't object. She never did when it suited her. At home, I pulled open the drawer of documents, bank, property, pension. Paper rustled under my hands. I divided everything into piles, the order itself, calming me. Maggie called. "You skipped bingo," she said. "I had dinner with Chloe." "How'd that go?" "Like grading a test you already know the score of. Bad, then worse." She hesitated, then softened. "You can't keep protecting her feelings if she's spending yours." The truth of it stayed with me long after we hung up. I folded the property deeds, slid them beneath old tax forms. Not an ending, just a pause before one. Rain began steady against the siding. I sat at the table, the room faintly scented with damp paper and detergent. My wife once told me to lock the gate during storms. Water finds the smallest opening, she'd say. That's how damage starts. Maybe she hadn't meant weather. I picked up the forged paper, thumbed over the false signature. Each curl of ink felt like a warning written too late. By the time I shut off the lights, the house had settled into its usual hum. I lay in bed, but didn't sleep. Memory shuffled through itself. Chloe's childhood laughter, her scraped knees the first time she called me Grandpa, like it meant something. Then her voice at the restaurant. After the wedding, I hope Grandpa disappears. Got up, drank a glass of water in the dim kitchen. A floorboard popped from age. For a moment I imagined smaller footsteps, the ones that used to run toward me. Chloe called not long after, her tone carrying that false warmth, half command, half courtesy. She wanted me at another family dinner. I agreed, curious how long she could pretend everything was fine. The restaurant was crowded plates, clinking voices overlapping. She waved from the far end of a long table, Kyle beside her, both lit by attention. I sat near the edge beside a cousin whose name I'd forgotten. Chloe stood and tapped her glass. "Everyone I want to thank my grandpa. Without him, none of this would be possible." Applause rippled through the room. I nodded once. Then she added too brightly, "After the wedding, Kyle and I might fix up Grandpa's old house, make it a cozy Airbnb. Maybe it'll fund the honeymoon." More laughter. Someone called out, "Brilliant idea." I stayed still, every sound dulled to a hum. My spoon slipped and hit the tablecloth. A voice, mine, I think, murmured, "That's quite the plan." Her smile tightened. "Oh, you know, we'll take care of it." I wanted to ask whose house she thought it was, but couldn't. I reached for my glass and took a slow sip. The conversation carried on without me. When dinner ended, hugs and promises filled the room. I left before anyone noticed. The night was cool, my steps steady on the walk back to the car. No anger this time, just a small, firm shift inside. At home, I left my jacket on the chair and sat in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. The walls, the furniture, every small choice my wife and I had made, it all seemed to hold a memory. The thought of strangers sleeping in our bed, spilling wine on her rug, made my stomach turn. A knock startled me. Maggie stood there with a small box. "You weren't at the potluck," she said. "Figured you skipped dinner." I motioned her in. She studied me. "You've got that look again?" "What look?" "The one that means you're swallowing something that'll poison you." I told her about the dinner. She didn't interrupt. She poured tea, waited. When I finished, she said, "You can't teach gratitude. You can only stop giving people new things to take." Her words hit deep. She'd built her own life again after losing everything. Maybe strength comes from learning how to lose without breaking. After she left, I started packing small things, old lesson plans, my wife's recipe book cufflinks I hadn't worn in years. Not because I planned to leave, but because order felt like control. I woke early birds too loud for comfort. I shaved, made tea, and called an attorney whose card I'd kept for decades. When the receptionist asked about the reason, I said estate revisions. At the office, the attorney remembered me. "What can I help you with?" I laid the papers on his desk. "I want everything to go where it belongs, not to whoever reaches first." He nodded. "We can arrange that." Afterward, I stopped at a cafe. The waitress greeted me by name and remembered my usual order. That small recognition steadied me more than she knew. Back home, light stretched across the rooms. I moved through each one, deciding what to keep. My wife's sewing machine, Chloe's drawings, family photos along the hallway. I ran my hand over the frames but left them hanging. That evening I sat sorting letters and receipts. The repetition was calming. Each envelope sealed a bit of chaos away. The phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. "Hey, can you send the florist deposit? They need it by tomorrow." I read it twice, then typed, "I'll handle what needs handling," and turned off the phone. At the table, I made a list: accounts to close, documents to update, names to cross out. A quiet inventory of what was still mine. The bank clerk recognized me. He motioned toward a cubicle. My hands smelled faintly of soap. I'd scrubbed them twice, as if clean skin might make cleaner choices. He checked the forms. "Would you like to move all funds into a separate account?" "Yes," I said evenly. He nodded. "We can finalize it today." "Do that," I replied, "and make sure no one else can touch it." He hesitated, "including family, especially family." The words hung there longer than I expected. He didn't ask again. Leaving the bank, I passed a young couple at the loan desk, their hands clasped like the future couldn't turn on them. I wondered if I'd ever carried that kind of certainty. Back home, dust from half-packed boxes lingered. I made a sandwich, left it untouched. Bread felt like cardboard in my mouth. I sat down with my checkbook. The numbers were smaller now, but wholly my own. The phone rang. Maggie. "You sound tired," she said. "Paperwork," I told her. "Trouble with Chloe. Let's call it clarity. You've carried her long enough. At some point she has to walk on her own. She thinks she already is. Then let her fall. People learn more on the ground." I almost laughed. "You've grown philosophical. I've grown older. Not the same thing." When we hung up, I caught myself staring at the blank wall where a photo had hung that morning. I'd put it away. Later, I wrote to my lawyer, New Will the house, to an educational fund in my wife's name. No family listed. The decision sat heavy but right. I signed, sealed, and left the letter by the door. The day dimmed. I turned on the porch light, though I had no plans to step out. Its glow bled softly through the curtains. For some reason, it unsettled me. A knock came. Maggie again, holding a small bag. "Brought you something? Oranges." "You're feeding me too much," I said. "Someone has to. You'd live off caffeine and regret." She noticed the missing picture. Too hard to look at, too hard to believe in. She nodded, eyes sweeping the room. When my son stopped calling, I kept checking the phone every night. Then I realized I was waiting for someone who'd already left. That's when I started painting. "Painting badly," she said. But it kept me from waiting. Her honesty left the room still. When she left, the faint citrus smell lingered. I turned to the desk, aligning papers, mortgage, insurance, taxes. Decades of neat columns and small decisions. I'd spent years teaching cause and effect, how history shifts in whispers before it breaks. Maybe this was mine, smaller, slower, but real. A pink note caught my eye. "Chloe's from months back. Love you, Grandpa. Can't wait to show you the dress." The loops in her handwriting were the same as when she was little. I folded it until it was the size of a coin and tucked it into the metal box of things that once mattered. The clock on the wall stuttered unevenly. I found myself matching its rhythm, then rose to wash the plate in the sink. The simple act steadied me. I drafted a message to Chloe. "We'll talk soon. Handle your plans without me for now." My thumb hovered, then I let the phone dim. Next to the mug lay my list tasks before the wedding, before everything found its place. Update the lawyer, close the joint account, call the realtor. I crossed each one out. The pen scrape felt final. At the last blank line, I stopped. The page waited. The weeks before the wedding slipped by like a slow leak. No bursts, just the steady loss of patience. Chloe's messages arrived daily, each one a request, dressed as courtesy deposits tips, extra chairs. I replied only when necessary, brief and flat. She didn't notice. At the post office, I mailed the letter to my lawyer. The clerk asked if I wanted tracking. I shook my head. Some things were better sent without watching where they landed. Home again, I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen table. The house felt hollow, every sound amplified. I started a list of things to sell: furniture tools, the mower that hadn't started in years. Sorting felt easier than remembering. Maggie arrived near noon, carrying a folder. "You might need help with these donation receipts," she said, already sitting down. That was her way, steady certainty. We worked in near silence. Then she asked, "You ever think of leaving this place?" "Sometimes," I said. "Then I remember I've got roots." "Roots can strangle if you don't trim them," she replied, eyes still on the papers. I smiled. "You sound like a gardener again." "Habit," she said, "and maybe a warning." Hours passed in the soft rhythm of paper shuffling. She mentioned a stray cat that had taken to her porch. I told her it probably wasn't stray, it had chosen her. She laughed and said she'd name it Trouble. Before leaving, she touched my arm. "You're calmer than I expected." Calm's what's left when anger runs out. Her hand lingered a second, then she left. I opened the drawer with my bank statements. Everything sat in neat order now. The numbers once meant for Chloe's future looked like quiet proof of misplaced faith. Late light spilled across the table. I moved through the rooms, brushing dust from things I hadn't touched in months. My wife's rocking chair, her sewing basket, the faint scent of lavender on the cushion. I kept my hand there until the ache dulled. The phone buzzed. Chloe again. "Grandpa, did you get the venue invoice?" "I did. They need payment by Friday. I'll take care of my part." "Your part?" "Yes." A pause followed long enough to say everything neither of us would. "You sound like one of your old teachers again, strict and mysterious. Maybe just practical." She muttered something, then hung up. The kettle whistled. I poured water over a tea bag, steady hands this time. Steam rose faint and thin. Among the envelopes Maggie left sat one with a note in her looping hand. "For when you're ready to start over. Use it for the bus ticket or first rent, whatever you decide." She hadn't signed it. She didn't need to. The idea of leaving pressed at me like a door I hadn't dared to open. I folded the note and slipped it into my wallet. The neighbor's dog barked once, then fell silent. I stood at the door. The porch light flickered weakly, pulling my gaze. Houses across the street glowed with television colors, families settling into evenings that no longer included me. It was too late to call Maggie too early to sleep. I opened a drawer and found Chloe's old essays, one titled, "What Family Means to Me." A gold star clung to the corner. She'd drawn a crooked heart beside my name. I held it for a while, tracing the faint crayon line until it blurred. Maybe love didn't disappear. It just faded until you couldn't tell it was there. A new text arrived. "Don't forget your checkbook on the big day Kyle's mom said you'll sit with us at the front table." I read it twice, then set the phone face down. The wedding day came gray and still. I dressed slowly, button by button, in the same suit worn for graduations and funerals. The tie fought back. My hands shook not from age, but restraint. The lawyer's letter slipped into my pocket, confirming what I already knew: every account, every right to the house, locked and separate. The envelope felt heavier than it should. The car started on the second tri-engine, humming like an old friend still willing to help. I drove through familiar streets, past houses that had watched me age. In shop glass, my reflection flickered an ordinary man running an errand. The hotel by the river was too grand for us. Guests drifted past in polished shoes, glasses already filled. Chloe found me near the door, her dress bright enough to catch the light. She smiled, practiced, and perfect. "You made it," she said, gripping my arm before anyone else could. I said I would. She leaned in. "Did you bring the check I brought myself? That'll have to do." She blinked, unsure whether I meant it, before she could ask someone called her name. I found a seat at the edge of the room. The ceremony blurred promises, applause, soft music. Words about love and family drifted past like static. I caught none of them. My eyes wandered to the trees, bending with the breeze. At dinner, a man in a tux tapped his glass and called me the generous grandfather who made today possible. Applause swelled. I stayed seated. It faltered. Chloe's face pleaded. I stood only to end the noise. "I appreciate the kind words," I said, "but there's been a mistake. I didn't make today possible. Chloe and Kyle did. They've built their own future." Someone tried to clap again. I kept talking. "As for me, I'll be stepping aside. The house stays as it is. The accounts are closed. I wish you both well." The silence had weight. Chloe's face drained. Kyle froze mid-gesture. Whispers filled the pause. I buttoned my jacket and nodded. "Enjoy the evening." I walked out slowly. Cold air hit like water. The music faded behind me. At the edge of the lot, the river curved beneath a low bridge, rippling from the drizzle. Maggie appeared with an umbrella. "I saw you leave," she said. "You all right?" "Better than I expected." She tilted the umbrella toward me. "You did what you had to. I just told the truth. Maybe late." "Late still counts," she said. We stood watching the rain blur the pavement. When thunder rolled far off, she offered me a ride. I told her I'd walk. "Stop by tomorrow," she said. "I'll make soup." I nodded. She left, and I followed the river path, shoes sinking into soft ground. Music from the hall still carried faintly, laughter distant and fading. By the time I reached my car, the rain had slowed. I sat behind the wheel, but didn't start it. My reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, not older, just emptied. I pulled off the tie, tossed it on the seat. My hands rested on the steering wheel until the weight eased. Then I turned the key. The drive home was steady, marked by the wiper's rhythm. At every red light, I glanced at my phone. No messages came. The phone buzzed before dawn. I let it ring, then ring again. Messages piled up, texts, voicemails, all from Chloe. The first few were sharp with anger, the rest unraveling into panic. Embarrassed, ruined. Everyone's talking. I read them once and set the phone face down. Rain drummed on the porch roof. I poured a cup of coffee, stared at it until it cooled. Somewhere a siren rose, then faded. By mid-morning, the house felt smaller. I walked to the post office mostly to move. Streets gleamed with puddles. A few neighbors nodded, but didn't stop. Small towns always knew more than they should. The clerk from last week smiled nervously. "Wet day," she said, sliding a receipt over. "Sure is." On my way out, a copy of the local paper lay open on a bench. Whitman Wedding stretched across the page. A photo of Chloe and Kyle cutting cake. No mention of the truth. I almost laughed. Appearances always win. Back home, I changed clothes and brewed another cup. The smell filled the room without warmth. I turned on the radio for company, just static, then a voice droning about weekend weather. Maggie called. Maggie, you holding up? I've been worse. She's been calling me too, she said. Wants me to talk to you. She's efficient. She's scared, Maggie said. She's telling people you've gone senile. Let her. People believe what comforts them. She hesitated. Do you regret it? No, I said. Regrets for mistakes. That was correction. We talked briefly. She offered to bring groceries. I told her not to bother. The day dragged. I tried reading, couldn't focus. Sorted bills, rearranged a drawer I'd already fixed twice. The phone buzzed again. I ignored it until I didn't. Grandpa, she said, voice thin, please just talk to me. I'm listening. You embarrassed me. Everyone saw. They think I'm a liar. You are. Her breath caught. I didn't mean to hurt you. You meant to help yourself. That's not fair, she said. You don't know how hard it is starting out. I just needed help. You've had help your whole life. Traffic hummed faintly on her end. I thought you'd forgive me. I did, I said. That's why I stopped expecting better. She started to cry. I let the silence stretch, not punishment, just truth finding room to breathe. When she steadied, she asked, what am I supposed to do now? Same as everyone else, I said. Work. Apologize. Grow up. She tried to speak again, but I hung up. The dial tone hummed until it cut itself off. I rinsed the cup. Warm water cooled against my hands. Steam rose faded. Clouds began to thin. Light spread over the yard, glinting on the wet grass. I stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath me. Rain had washed everything, roofs, roads, whatever else could be cleaned. The stillness afterward carried a different weight, like the pause after confession. Across the street, a boy tossed a ball against a fence, the thump steady as breath. Life returned as it always does. The world forgets faster than we do. I went back in, draped a towel over a chair, sat again. The clock ticked softly. My body felt tired in a way rest couldn't cure. A calm settled in something earned, not given. By dusk, Maggie arrived with soup still steaming. You look better, she said. I feel lighter. You earned that, she said, unpacking bread. We ate without a word, no explanations. When she stood to leave, she touched my arm. You may not believe it now, but this is what healing looks like. I watched her walk down the path, umbrella dipping with each step. Raindrops clung to the eaves. The phone stayed still for once. I didn't step out for 2 days. The house held a heaviness, waiting for permission to move again. I busied myself sorting mail, watering plants, wiping the porch rails. But my thoughts circled Chloe's trembling voice, caught between guilt and pride. When the phone stayed silent, I knew she'd cast me as the villain. That was her way. If she couldn't earn sympathy, she'd manufacture it. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. By the third day, I walked to Maggie's. Her yard smelled faintly of pine and detergent. She opened the door before I knocked. You've been distant, she said, trying not to make noise that doesn't help. She poured coffee strong enough to taste like medicine. We sat at the table listening to the kettle hum behind us. People are talking, she said. Chloe's telling folks you're confused, that someone's manipulating you. I've heard, I said. Let them. I've been misquoted before. You're handling this too calmly. I've had practice. From what disappointment? Her face softened. She didn't reach for pity, just let silence hold its place. After coffee, she asked if I wanted to drive to the market. I agreed. The movement might help. Her old sedan rattled as it idled. She talked about prices, whether a neighbor's new puppies, small things meant to keep a wound from pulsing. At the store, some people looked away. Others offered thin smiles. Public shame works like that, half the world pretending not to see the rest staring too long. At checkout, Maggie asked if I'd join her for dinner. I told her maybe. When she dropped me off, she squeezed my hand. Don't spend the evening talking to ghosts, she said. The house felt cooler when I came in. I sat at the desk and opened a thick envelope from the bank confirmation of new ownership. Chloe's name was gone. Seeing it in print closed something I hadn't realized was still open. Another envelope waited no return address. A single note. You didn't have to humiliate me. You could have told me privately. Now I have nothing." The signature was Chloe's, the loops shaky. I folded it and set it aside, staring at the space it left behind. Maybe she truly thought she was the only one who'd lost something. The clock clicked softly. I remembered a line I used to tell my students. Truth doesn't need comfort, only courage. I hadn't known back then how much it would turn back on me. Evening came. I made soup from what I had left. The scent was plain grounding. Ate slowly, each spoonful deliberate. The heat burned my tongue, and I smiled. It proved I could still feel something other than regret. Headlights passed, a door shut, then a knock. Chloe stood there, eyes red, makeup streaked, smaller somehow. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked straight to the table, glanced at the bowl of soup, then at me. "You really did it?" she said. "You erased me. I erased the part of you that kept erasing me." She winced. "You think this feels good?" "No, but it feels fair." Neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Kyle left." "I know. He said I'm unstable, that I ruined everything." "Maybe he's right," I said. "Or maybe he's the kind of man who needs everything handed to him." "I didn't mean to forge your name," she said. "Kyle told me it was just paperwork. I thought I could fix it before you found out." "And if you hadn't been caught..." She didn't answer. The silence stretched until it became another presence in the room. "Grandpa," she said finally. "I don't know how to fix this. That's the thing about broken things," I said. "Sometimes you don't fix them. You learn to live without them." She paced, eyes unfocused. "Everyone hates me." "No," I said. "They just see you now." Tears welled. "Do you hate me?" "Hate takes energy," I said. "I'm done spending it." Rain began again, steady and light. She looked toward the door. "You won't help me." "I already did," I said. "I stopped helping you destroy yourself." Her shoulders sagged. She whispered a thank you that sounded more like surrender. By mid-morning, the phone started again. Neighbors, relatives, people who hadn't called in years. Some wanted to check on me. Most wanted details. I let them all ring out. You can't correct gossip once it starts. You just wait for it to tire itself. The doorbell rang around 10. I expected Maggie, but it was a man from the mortgage company. Clipboard, pressed shirt, polite smile. "Routine verification," he said. I let him in. His shoes left clean prints on the rug. He flipped through the forms, page after page. "Everything looks in order, Mr. Whitman. The new deed transfer's complete." The words were plain, but they settled something deep. The house was mine again, finally unentangled from anyone else's name. When he left, I watched him go down the drive. The sky hung dull and white, neither early nor late. I decided to drive to the store, not out of need, just to move. The car hummed softly. I kept the radio off. At a red light, a young couple crossed the street, sharing earbuds, laughing at nothing. Their ease stung, not for its youth, but for its certainty. I missed believing love could stay simple. At the store, I bought bread, apples, and jam things I didn't need. Near the flowers, Maggie was choosing marigolds. Their bright orange cut through the gray. "Running errands?" she asked. "Pretending to," I said. "That's one way to stay steady." "Does it ever last?" She smiled. "Not long. That's why we keep walking." We parted at the lot. I watched her car disappear before heading home. I made a sandwich, sliced an appleate standing at the counter. The act itself felt medicinal. Catching my reflection in the glass, I saw the same posture I'd kept while grading papers years ago, shoulders slightly bent, eyes elsewhere. Habits outlive purpose. The mail came in a small bundle, mostly junk. One envelope stood out handwritten, unfamiliar. A letter from the bank apologizing for fraudulent use of your information, along with a brochure on senior financial protection. The irony was almost kind. I set it down, then picked it up again. Someone must have helped Chloe fill out those forms. Kyle, maybe. She was clever, but not in that way. It didn't matter. The damage was already old. Branches scraped the roof. I stepped out to steady the trash bin before it toppled. Across the street, the neighbor's kid waved from his bike. "Hi, Mr. Whitman," he called. I waved back. Back in the house, I sat on the couch and stared at my phone. Chloe's number glowed. I pressed call. It rang twice. Her voice came tired. "What do you want to make sure you're all right?" "I'm fine. You can stop pretending." "I'm not." She gave a short laugh. "You burned the ground under me and now you want to check the ashes. That's one way to see it." Traffic moved faintly behind her. "You got what you wanted," she said. "The house, the money, your pride. You win. It's not a game. No one wins." "Maybe not," she said, "but someone always loses." Then the line went dead. I held the phone a moment longer before setting it down. The stillness after her voice felt heavier than the call itself. Evening dimmed slowly. I pulled a blanket over my lap, the television murmuring without meaning. When the reporter mentioned a flood warning, I muted it and listened to the wind pressing at the glass. The doorbell rang again, Maggie holding a small paper bag. "Brought stew," she said. "Made too much." "Thanks." She studied my face. "You talked to her," I did, "and nothing changed." "Things never do that quickly," she said, "but sometimes they shift just enough to notice later." Rain carried through the night into day. I woke to it, tracing the gutters steady as breathing. My hands ached from the chill, so I wrapped them around a mug, watching puddles gather along the street. Maggie called. "You all right? I'm still here." That's not an answer. Then maybe it's the only one that fits. "You need to get out," she said. "Come by later, we'll drive to the market." "I'll think about it. Thinking doesn't count as moving." I smiled. "You should have been a teacher. I was married to one. Learned enough." After we hung up, I changed shirts and walked to the mailbox. The morning smelled of wet wood and asphalt. One envelope weighted plain creased a notice Kyle Whitman has filed for bankruptcy. Their joint account frozen. The words co-signer Chloe Whitman looked like a bruise on the page. I stared at it, feeling neither satisfaction nor sorrow, just the weight of confirmation. I folded it and placed it in the drawer with the week's mail. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Grandpa. It was Chloe, her voice thinner, frayed. I didn't know who else to call. "What happened?" "They took the car. I can't get into the apartment. Kyle's gone. I don't have anywhere to go." Rain tapped the roof in short bursts. "I can wire you something for a motel," I said. "I don't want money," she whispered. "I just need to come home." The word hung there fragile. I glanced around the kitchen, the faded walls, the scent of my wife's perfume still faint. "This house isn't what it used to be." "I know. I'll find somewhere else if you want. I just didn't know who else would answer." Her honesty cracked something open. "Come by," I said. "We'll talk." When she arrived, she looked worn, makeup gone, hair pulled back smaller somehow. She clutched a duffel bag, hesitating in the doorway. "Smells the same," she said softly. "Everything old does." She sat while I made tea. The kettle's hum filled the space. When I set her cup down, she reached for it like she wasn't sure she was allowed. I ruined everything she said, not everything I replied, but enough to notice. She nodded, eyes on the steam. I thought I was doing what people my age are supposed to do, get ahead. I didn't see what I was turning into. "You saw," I said. "You just didn't want to believe it." Tears came quick. "You hate me." "No, hate's too heavy." "Then why do you look at me like that? I'm still trying to recognize you." We sat until the tea cooled. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was my wife's wedding ring. "I sold the others," she said, "but not this." I couldn't. The sight of it stung. I closed the box and slid it back. "Keep it. You'll need a reminder of what commitment looks like." Her shoulders trembled. "I don't know where to start." "Start with nothing," I said. "It's honest." She talked about debts, arguments, how silence had swallowed their marriage. I listened not to forgive, but to understand the ruins. By afternoon, she stood to leave. I handed her an address, a boarding house near the river. "Tell them I sent you. They'll give you a week free." Her eyes met mine. I don't deserve this. Deserving doesn't matter. Just do better. At the door, she turned. I never meant to make you feel small. You didn't, I said. You just reminded me how small kindness looks when someone mistakes it for weakness. She nodded, then stepped into the drizzle. I watched her cross the yard the same path she'd run barefoot as a child. No car, now just fog, swallowing her shape. Maggie came by with groceries and that look people wear when they're afraid to ask. She set the basket on the counter, bread milk, a few apples. Heard Chloe came last night, she said. She did. She's staying, no, just passing through. Maggie poured coffee without asking. You all right with that? I think I already am. You look lighter. Maybe that's what letting go feels like. We sat a while, saying little. The stillness between us was easy earned. She mentioned a town fair next weekend, asked if I'd like to go. I said I might. The thought of being among strangers didn't sound bad anymore. After she left, I opened the back door. The yard was damp grass bent from last night's rain. I took the rake from the shed and cleared the leaves. The scrape of metal against soil steadied me. When I finished, I sat on the steps, breathing in the scent of wet earth. The phone rang. It wasn't Chloe, a man from the community center. Mr. Whitman, we're starting a tutoring program for high school students, he said. Maggie told us you used to teach. Would you be interested? I hesitated, then said yes, not because I missed it, but because it seemed a way forward. That afternoon, I went to sign the forms. The building was old paint, peeling from the sills, but the noise was bright pencils, scratching chairs, scraping kids, murmuring. A woman behind the desk handed me a schedule. You'll mostly handle math, she said. Some of them just need structure. I can do structure, I told her. Back home after the dishes, I sat in my wife's old chair. The cushion had molded to her shape. On the table beside it sat the jewelry box Chloe had returned. I opened it, looked at the ring's worn gold, catching the faintest light. I left it there. The next few days passed easily. I tutored twice a week. The students were polite, distracted, but eager. One boy, Marcus, had a quick mind. He struggled with fractions, but not with curiosity. You ever get tired of numbers, he asked. All the time, I said, but they never get tired of me. He grinned. Guess that's the deal, huh? That's the deal, I said, and he laughed like he understood more than math. Evenings settled into rhythm. I cooked, Rid sometimes called Maggie, to share something one of the kids said. You sound like a man who's found a rhythm, she told me. I think it found me, I said. One night, as I was putting dishes away, a knock came late, too late for visitors. Chloe stood there again, suitcase in hand, a hesitant smile. I got the job at the diner, she said. Part-time, but it's something. That's good. I'm still at the boarding house. They let me pay ahead. You came to tell me that she shook her head. To bring this, she handed me an envelope. Was a check. I sold the car, she said. It's what I owed you. I looked at it, then slid it back. Keep it. I can't. You can. Starting over costs more than you think. Her eyes glimmered. I wanted to make things right. You already are. Can I visit sometimes whenever you're ready? She smiled, small but true. Thank you, Grandpa. Take care, I said, meaning it. The week moved gently. I kept a rhythm, tutoring, walking, cooking early so nights stayed uncluttered. Not joy, but steadiness. Routine keeps grief from circling too close. While reviewing lesson notes, the phone rang. Maggie's voice was brisk. You've got mail at the center, she said. Looks official. I'll stop by after lunch, I told her. At the center, the receptionist handed me a sealed envelope stamped with the county seal. I expected taxes or some forgotten bill, but the return address read, Probate Office. I opened it right there in the hall. It was short. Kyle had died 2 nights ago, a highway accident. No alcohol, no drugs, just bad weather and a truck that didn't see him. I stood holding the paper. Shock didn't come, just a flat stillness. People talk about closure, but it isn't a door shutting. It's realizing the house you were standing in isn't there anymore. Maggie appeared beside me. "What is it?" I handed her the letter. She read it, exhaled. "Does Chloe know I doubt it?" "I'll tell her." "Want me to come?" "No," I said. "It's mine to do." That evening, I drove to the diner where Chloe worked. The sun had slipped behind the hills. Through the glass, she was clearing tables, hair tied back, apron stained. For a moment, she looked like anyone trying to rebuild an ordinary life. When she noticed me, surprise flickered. "Grandpa, everything okay?" I waited until she finished wiping the table. "Let's step out back." The air behind the diner smelled of fry oil and wet pavement. I handed her the letter. She read it twice, then whispered, "No, that can't be right." "It is." She sank onto the curb, the paper trembling in her hands. Traffic hummed nearby. "We hadn't talked in weeks," she said. "I told him I was done. I didn't mean forever. We never do." Tears came fast. "He was awful to me," she said, "but I didn't want this. I know." Her voice wavered. "What do I do now?" "Keep living. It's all any of us ever manage." We sat there until she could breathe again. When she stood, she folded the letter into her apron. "They'll need someone to claim the body," she said. "His parents won't. They blame me. I'll go with you." The next day, we drove to the coroner's office. The corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper. The clerk spoke softly, as if loss required lower volume. Chloe signed the forms with a steady hand, though her lip trembled each time she wrote her name. Outside, the sky was washed pale. We sat in the car for a long stretch before she said, "I thought I'd feel angry. But it's just empty." Emptiness is what's left when everything else burns off. She turned toward me. "You've felt that too, more than I'd like." We drove back mostly in silence. At the diner, she turned to me before getting out. "Thank you for staying. You don't have to thank me. This is what family was meant to be." She nodded. "I'll stop by later. I just need to finish my shift." As she walked away, I noticed how different she looked, less fragile, more certain. Pain had carved something honest into her face. The funeral was small. No flowers, no speeches, just a few people under a sky that couldn't decide whether to rain. Chloe stood beside me, composed a folded program in her hand. I kept my eyes on the ground. It made thinking easier. When the pastor finished, people drifted off, murmuring polite phrases neither of us would remember. Chloe lingered. "Do you think he knew how bad it got? I think he knew enough." She nodded. "I'm not sure what comes next. No one ever is." We left soon after. On the drive back, she leaned against the glass eyes, half closed. "I thought I'd feel relief," she said. "Instead, it's like everything stopped moving." "That's what grief does," I said. "It freezes things until you forget how to breathe through them." She didn't answer, but her hand drifted toward mine before pulling away. Some distances take time to cross. At home, she made tea, moving through the kitchen like she had as a child, opening the wrong cabinet, smiling when she found the right one. I sat at the table and watched the kettle steam. "I'll be moving next week," she said. "The diner offered me full time. One of the girls there needs a roommate. That sounds steady." She set the cups down. "I'll still visit if you don't mind." "I don't." We drank in easy stillness. She asked about Maggie. I told her we still worked together at the tutoring program. "You'd like her," I said. "She doesn't fill silence just to kill it." Chloe's mouth twitched. "That's rare." After she left, I stepped onto the porch. Branches from the last storm littered the yard. I gathered them into a pile, the rhythm of the motion grounding me. Later, Maggie called. "How'd it go?" "As well as something like that can. You sound worn." "Not worn, just emptied out. Sometimes that's what peace feels like starting." "Maybe," I said, "but peace feels overrated tonight." She chuckled softly. Then let it sneak up on you. That night I slept without dreams, the kind of dark that feels merciful. The next day I went to the community center. Marcus was already there, hunched over a workbook. "You're late, old man," he said. "5 minutes," I replied. "You're just early." He grinned. "Guess that's how you get ahead." We spent the hour working through equations. When he finally solved one that had stumped him for weeks, he leaned back, satisfied. "Feels good," he said. "It usually does." After class, I stopped at the diner for lunch. Chloe was behind the counter, hair tied neatly, apron clean. When she saw me, her smile came quick. "Coffee," she asked, "please." While she poured, her hand stayed steady, no tremor, no rush. The low hum of voices filled the place, alive in its own way. When I finished eating, I left a tip under the cup and waved. She mouthed, "Thank you." I pretended not to see. Let her think she was the one keeping things even. Maybe she was. The street still glistened from last night's storm. Tires hissed over wet pavement as I crossed to my car. I took the long way home past bare trees and fields edged with gold. Through the fence I caught a glimpse of the cemetery, the fresh mound still rough against the trimmed grass. No anger, no sadness, just distance. Maggie was waiting on the porch with a thermos. "Didn't think you'd mind," she said. "I never do." She handed it to me. "Figured you could use company that doesn't talk much." We sat side by side, trading small details, the scent of damp soil birds on the wires, light easing back through the clouds. It wasn't conversation, just shared space. After she left, I sorted through a box of keepsakes, my wife's letters, Chloe's drawings, old report cards, faded receipts. I didn't linger, just arranged them neatly, a habit that felt like breathing. My phone buzzed. "Dinner was good. Got a raise. Hope you're resting." I typed back, "Proud of you. One day at a time." I woke early, more from habit than rest. The house held stillness, no calls, no tension pressing in. I brewed coffee and let the faint chill drift through the open frame, the damp sweetness from last night's rain softening everything it touched. The place smelled of soap and wood. I'd cleaned it over the weekend, not because it needed it, but because order has its own calm. Each thing in place, nothing left waiting. At the community center, the kids were already bent over notebooks. Marcus grinned. "You're early today. Running out of excuses to stay home," I said. The sound of pencils scraping paper filled the room. Lila asked for help with an essay about family. I told her to write the truth, not what she thought sounded right. People can tell when you're pretending. She nodded, started again her handwriting, careful and clean. When class ended, the coordinator handed me a small envelope. Just a thank you. Inside was a grocery card and a note signed by the students. Marcus had drawn a stick figure labeled Mr. W. I smiled, something I hadn't done in months. At lunch, I stopped by the diner. The bell over the door chimed, and Chloe looked up from the counter. "Hey, stranger. Thought I'd visit before you close." "Good timing. We're slow." She poured coffee without asking. "You hear about Maggie's garden?" "What about it?" "She says her tomatoes survived the frost. Swears it's because she talks to them." "That sounds like her." Chloe leaned against the counter. "She asked about you, said you've been distant." "I'm getting used to peace," I said. "That's allowed," she smiled. "Just don't vanish completely. People notice." The coffee was bitter, but it grounded me. "You doing all right here?" "Better than all right. It's not much, but it's mine. Feels good to stand on something solid." "You sound older," I said. "Maybe I finally am." She turned to refill the pot. Her movements were steady, sure. The hum of dishes and voices filled the space easily. When I finished, she waved me off. "Lunch is on me. Family discount." I left a few bills tucked beneath the napkin holder and stepped into sunlight. The drive home wound through town past the church where my wife's service had been held. I slowed near the cemetery, but didn't stop. Some memories tend themselves. Maggie was on my porch with her sketchbook. "You have a knack for showing up unannounced," I said. "That's my charm," she replied, holding out a paper bag. A loaf of bread still warm. "You'll spoil me." "Too late," she said with a grin. "You look well, Harold. I feel steady. Steady's enough." We sat watching the street. Neighbors passed and waved. The world moved gently again. "That fence still leaning?" she asked. "Always has been. You ever going to fix it, maybe? But it's held this long." She laughed. "So have you."